You mean the having what the government needs to do right now to get Ajaokuta working?
No, to get the solid mineral sector up and really running.
Okay, thank you. The solid mineral sector is quite vast. Like we said, Ajaokuta still is just one part of it. We have so many others. And in truth, the Chinese are quite good with mining. So it's good if we have agreements with a number of the private players in China to come develop our sectors here, probably gold, tin, columbite, and so much more. But the industries we already have set up, which have been morbid for a while, it is best that we look back at the agreement which had them set up previously and see how we could call back the original participators so they could negotiate with the government a best way forward. Like on Ajaokuta now, the original builders, which is Tiazaprom Export TPE of Russia, they have been over the past few years willing to come back to complete Ajaokuta. But for some reason, I find it weird why the Nigerian government is not opening its doors. I actually expected that by now, our Honorable Minister, Dr. Fayemi, would have taken his team of experts down to Russia, sit down on the round table, and discuss with them the possibilities of opening up. For example, look at what the Russians are doing with Egypt. They are presently building Africa's largest industrial park in Egypt. In that industrial park, there's going to be a whole lot of electronics, automobiles, medical equipment, agricultural tools, and co that will be produced there. And this is what we can have in Nigeria. I mean, this is the original plan, that Kogi State and other environs will be industrial hubs, you know, utilizing the raw materials that are on ground. So mining is very key to Nigeria. And by God's grace, we already have the huge minerals reserves. We already have the abundant human capital. We have the aggressive resilience of Nigerians who are willing to do things. They've been making a tremendous products. Look at the immediate past Aba trade fair. So I think at this point, we just need to sit down and be honest with ourselves. The contracts we have opened up now, we need to sit back and renegotiate them. These are low-hanging fruits that our government can consider while we open our borders for future investments. So for Ajaokuta, I do believe that our government needs to look up and respond positively to the original builders who have been knocking our doors for many years now.
What do you think is the impediment? Why do you think the government doesn't want TPE back?
That's a very tough question. It's not that tough, but you were putting me up there to speak. Well, on one part, I believe there are lots of international conspiracies around, which were only fueled and made possible by domestic factors. Interests, vested interests. A lot of people seem to lean towards the Indians and the Chinese because they seem to facilitate business in the way Nigerians appreciate and love, if you know what that means. And Russians seems to be more on the straight part. They put their hearts where the mouth is. And if you have taken a trip to Ajaokuta, you will see that so far in the world, if it's working, it's supposed to be the 5th largest steel plant in the world and Africa's largest integrated steel complex. So the Russians were able to commit to get to that point because they had to put in a lot of strict measures to ensure that corruption was reduced in their operations. But if you look at the past concessions that Ajaokuta and Itakpe saw, the very last one, which was cancelled by our late President Yar'Adua on the Indians, he made a statement there that he had never seen a contract so fraudulently drafted by our own lawyers to the detriment of Nigeria. So that tells you that in any foreign investment coming in, there are some moles in our system that are only interested in the financial reward such investment will bring. And that is why our President, Buhari, right now has a lot to do in ensuring that those moles do not succeed and do not see the light of day. So asking why Nigeria is not calling on the original builders whose technology stands there and who I believe are the very best and only viable option. I mean, for 22 years since they left in 1994, we can tell that no positive mark has been made there. I think it's just best we sit down and have a direct and honest review of our mining industry and call the parties which we believe meant well for Nigeria. Why I say meant well is because if you study the international conspiracy surrounding Ajaokuta, you could tell that there was a time, America, just before we started developing our industries, the steel industry, there was a time the Americans, the British, the French, the Germans refused to help Nigeria develop our steel industries, to the point whereby the president, Shehu Shagari, had to turn back to Russia and say, you know what, I know you conducted the study and you proved to us, you told us that Nigeria has a proven reserve of steel and other minerals. Why don't you come back? And at that time, it was only Russia that actually listened to Nigeria, because they have this communist nature of helping countries strengthen their own economy for themselves. So that was why they looked up. It's a track record that Russia has with other countries. They come to a country and try to ensure that they strengthen. So right now it's left for Nigeria. If we want truth, if we want honest diversification, if we want to revive Nigeria and to revive Nigeria's economy for Nigerians and for our future and for Africa, we need to go back to the Russians, to TPE, call them.
There's so many, a lot of questions.
If it's the issue of financing, believe me, because that's one thing I heard, that Nigeria has got no penny to put into Ajaokuta. And that's why they're leaning a lot more to the Chinese. But we should be very careful. It's not all that glitters is gold. Nobody gives you something free and takes nothing. Very, very rare situations happen like that. So at this point, I believe our government can sit with the Russian government and discuss a means of financing Ajaokuta. It's all a matter of negotiation.
The thing about this,
the Egyptian
if I could comment, the thing about this is that many wonder, because the history of the presidency, not averse to having discussions with Russia to get certain things done. But about this Ajaokuta steel complex, because a lot has made the rounds on this one. But assuming the president says, okay, I've heard a lot about Ajaokuta, let me take a personal look for myself. If he decides to get across to the Russians who built it, what should he expect? How long will it take for that to come back? Because many give the impression that, look, it will cost an arm and a leg to get Ajaokuta back.
If you put your ears on ground, you are bound to hear so many views and so many versions. I talked about the conspiracy there, so there are so many there are so many papers flying around holding propagandas as to why Ajaokuta should not even work in the first place. But if our president calls on the TPE, which originally they are willing to come down, and have them give an honest opinion, on what it will cost to revive the plant, not just revive the plant, what it will cost Ajaokuta to yield returns and investment for Nigeria, I think they would, his answers will be clearly answered, will responded to. I would like to say here that the TPE, that's the Russian, they have been asking also if they could have an opportunity to speak to Nigeria. There's a petition I put up some months ago asking the Senate, Nigerian Senate, to look into Ajaokuta and to call all the stakeholders for a congressional hearing. Thereby everybody who has been a key player in Ajaokuta right now will be called forth to state their case. And the original builders, they will appreciate that. They're ready to come down and explain to Nigeria. A lot of people do not know that just before Yar'Adua died, immediately he terminated the contracts with Global Infrastructure, which is the Indians. He called forth the original builders. So they were in Nigeria in 2008, shortly after their president's visit. They came down, they spent 3 months in conducting a detailed technical analysis and evaluation. And after that, they also prepared a contract between the Ministry of Mines and Steel and the Russian government. In that contract, they specified the amount which was going to be needed to revive Ajaokuta. And at that time, Ajaokuta was going to need only $421 million. It actually was going to need only 220. And then the rail track riding from Ajaokuta to Onne Port, which was the deep sea port, based on their consideration then, was going to cost only 1.1 billion. In 2008, I believe if Nigeria was serious, we would have done that. But by the time they just finished negotiating, our late president, fell ill and he never recovered. And over the years, the TPE have been reaching out to Nigeria throughout the Jonathan's regime, reminding them that, look, we already have an open contract. We have been called upon. We have conducted the technical evaluation. Let us discuss, have the contract signed. Your country needs this. But for some reason, all the years during the Jonathan's regime, nobody gave a listening ear to TPE. And so when I started my investigation as to the way forward for Ajaokuta, I thought it was best to reach out to them and hear their own story. And what I heard was not pleasing. And I thought it was a joke. I said, okay, you know what? If the previous government had not given you a listening ear, I believe so much in Buhari. And I believe if he gets an opportunity to know of your intentions, he could bring you down to complete your brainchild. And then we wrote several letters. They wrote several letters to the minister. I actually met with the minister in his office, and he told me that he heard that the Russians were only interested in consultancy services and not the actual construction. And when I related it to them, I asked, can you please specify your intentions for Nigerians? Are you here just to offer consultancy services or to engage in the real reconstruction? They told me probably the minister and the president and the minister and the ambassador did not get themselves right. We are interested in coming down for the long haul. We want to complete what we started. We have developed over 40 plants around the world, and Ajakuta is the only one we have not yet commissioned, and it hurts us. So I think at this time, as much as we open our doors to China, we should also open our doors to the Russia. All right, they have always stood by our president. They have always stood by Nigeria every time we call. I mean, it was recorded that in January, as a matter of fact, our Minister of Defense approached Russia for some support, for some weapon support, defense support. So if we could approach Russia for an issue of national security, why can't we as well approach them for issue of economic growth?
All right, well, interesting perspectives. I'm afraid, Natasha, we've got to anchor here. Natasha Akpoti, social entrepreneur. Well, thank you for your thoughts, and I'm sure that the authorities are listening, and they hopefully will take a step further. Well, thank you for coming on this morning. We'll be back in a minute ourselves here, so don't go away.